Hi, this is Tracy Swedlow, Editor-in-Chief of Interactive TV Today and the co-producer of the TV of Tomorrow show.
And this is Colin Dixon, Founder and Chief Analyst at End Screen Media. And this is Tea Time.
Okay, so we've got a great show and someone we have not had on the show before or on Radio ITVT. So I'm really excited to welcome Field. Are you there?
I'm here, yeah.
So Field is the CEO of Iris.tv, which is spelled IRIS.tv. Field Garthwaite. And there is so much to go through here because you have, I think that Iris has been around since 2013 only, but you've been on our radar for quite a long time. Right, you've been in this industry for a number of years, and now you're deep in the heart of doing AI, machine learning, video recommendations, big data. This is the crux of what is driving business today. So we want to hear more about what Iris.tv, or should I just call it Iris, what it does from your perspective, and what are the key things you're trying to solve.
Yeah, terrific. Well, thank you for having me, guys. And yeah, as background, Iris TV is, as you said, a video personalization and programming platform. And what the technology does is it's a set of APIs that really act as a brain sitting on top of our client's infrastructure. And is using, we like to call it machine learning, right? Because it's various forms of supervised and unsupervised learning. And it's doing that to increase engagement, time on site, watching video, and loyalty over time. And really connecting those critical data elements back to the teams that need it to create a feedback loop that enables ongoing growth. So we do this for a couple hundred publishers and broadcasters today, like CBS, News Corp, and Gannett. And what we're really excited about is we feel like every media company has a unique advantage in the kind of exclusive content that they produce. And as they continue to improve their user experience and use data to drive their decision making, we believe that every publisher, broadcaster, telcos, digital business is going to continue to scale dramatically. And we don't mean that purely from a kind of a views perspective. We really are looking at everything from kind of a revenue and ROI perspective.
So we seem to have arrived at a peculiar moment in the business of entertainment because before the internet, before streaming, we really were data poor. And now we are the complete reverse. We are so data rich. It's really tough to process all of that data. And it seems to me, Field, that AI is uniquely placed to help us do that. So can you talk a little bit about how you use AI to process all of that data?
Yeah, I think what's really important is it's not a black box, right? So what you want is a system that you can kind of put in place. And unlike often kind of what we get back from, say, a Facebook or a Google, YouTube, if you're publishing on those platforms, or even Netflix and Amazon, if you're licensing content to them, you get very little data back. Whereas on your own properties, we really believe in kind of building a distributed kind of strategy where you're really leveraging your own assets, your owned and operated properties. You really kind of have this laboratory, so to speak, where you're able to essentially test, kind of see, which content is really engaging with audiences, what is really driving a high level of ROI, what signals then you can use to inform what to invest in, what to divest away from, what to feature, or really, acquire audiences to. So we view all of this as kind of an ongoing kind of experiment where you're using data to inform your decision making. And then over time, you start to see trends, right? Every kind of company we work with, whether they're in like news or sports or entertainment, lifestyle, or weather's become very big for us. They have kind of 52-week cycles where there's kind of certain kind of major tent poles. Of course, there's always unexpected events, but you can really begin to learn kind of techniques that allow you, just like we've seen with television distribution and kind of older, more established business models, methodologies for building a really large audience and building a great business.
I have a question. You review all these different platforms: YouTube, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all your customers. Who really is doing this best? Because I know which services I'm using and which ones I feel are managing, my recommendations best. But I'm kind of curious, since you have to study this day in and day out, and why, and what is best about what they're doing.
So I think in the ad-supported model, what we see kind of is that platforms like a Facebook or a YouTube, they're really focusing on like a single metric, right? Which is kind of time on that site, time either spent watching video or time on that platform. Netflix has a similar kind of metric for their platform. And when you have, amazing content, that really is exclusive and highly in demand, metrics like that can really work well. So I think that, kind of YouTube does a really excellent job of this. And they certainly, have problems with brand safety. And, as a publisher, if they kind of are, changing their algorithm, it can be kind of an inconsistent revenue stream, which is why we believe that O&O is so important. But that said, these are really valuable platforms. You do want to be on them. We think an important shift that's starting to occur with major broadcasters and even digital first publishers is using some of those ad-supported platforms as marketing as opposed to distribution. And so what I mean by that is using them as a means to understand, hey, what is really, getting attention? What is driving click-throughs? What caption or image or content is highly in demand, that actually we can use those platforms as a means to acquire audience to our own site. And if we have a great experience there, right, where we're also, kind of optimizing against a metric to keep viewers engaged, watching longer, not trying to show them too many ads, for example, then you can actually create a repeatable process for growth. So I think that's a really important one to keep in mind, in the ad-supported model. And then for subscription, where you have a lot more kind of exclusivity, and I was, on end screen kind of looking at some of the coverage of, say, someone even like CuriosityStream, which I thought was, quite fascinating, right? We're seeing that, you can actually have a niche audience, right? And really build, kind of a large and loyal, audience off of content if you truly understand what audiences are engaging with. And in that case, in the streaming kind of SVOD model, where it's, really about subscription revenue, one of the elements that we find to be surprising is how little of the first-party data that we were talking about earlier is used in kind of the marketing strategies, right? There's been DMPs, the data management platforms, and CDPs, customer data platforms, both for segments and kind of targeting individuals, around now for several years. But primarily the companies that use those well are e-commerce companies, that actually truly leverage that data and then build kind of repeatable strategies for either re-engaging folks who have expressed interest in products, or, building lookalike models to then go after new kind of, audiences and those that would be buying a product. And we feel like that every media company has a major opportunity to kind of tie together more of that first-party data. So that's an area we're spending a lot of time thinking about. That today, I think Netflix does the best job at that in the industry, probably followed by Prime.
I have always been amazed that that companies haven't taken more of an interest in driving real revenue through recommendations of things to buy. Like an Amazon should be doing that with their programming, and none of these platforms really take advantage of combining the power of e-commerce personalization and recommendation that is so strong, as you say, with the potential of video programming. It's, T-commerce has always been so elusive for all these companies.
Yeah, everything, as you say, Tracy, it's all one-dimensional, right? Subscription. We're seeing the emergence of advertising, but this is the data that you're gathering and you're able to process. Doesn't that give a lot more options to video providers?
It does, yeah. I mean, I think, the thing that we think every media company has an advantage in that they've yet to properly exploit is that if you have a great user experience and then you have exclusivity on your content, then you can create a formula that, like you said when we were chatting before, that it really turns into a science and, can dig in more there. But what you need to enable that is really kind of great data on the assets themselves. So a big part of our platform, without diving too deep on that side of it, is actually related to structuring and cleaning up the video asset data. So that's, everything from standardization, enrichment with partners like IBM Watson, to actually mapping to taxonomies, using natural language processing to append, more relevant data, And just like the way we think, we connect, ideas between, different topics, and kind of that's how conversations work. We find that when you append this data to assets, it can greatly increase the actual relevance and keep people watching more. So this is something that Netflix heavily invested in after they found that they couldn't do some of the methods developed originally by the Netflix Prize because it used PII. They really focused heavily on actually creating great data on their assets. That's a really important component of that. And once you have that, then anytime someone engages with that kind of asset, if you're structuring and organizing all of that consumption data in kind of a tightly regulated manner, then you can kind of use that. So we use it for programming and personalization to keep viewers watching longer. But as you both mentioned, you actually can then start tying that into your kind of marketing, acquisition, kind of any part of the business. You can kind of make it available for those key departments to make, the decisions that tie back to their goals, whether it's marketing or editorial or actually, content acquisition, everything.
You mentioned earlier about the importance of owned and operated sites, O&O sites. How do you help people adapt to using YouTube, for example, to help drive traffic to the O&O site? It's so difficult to get people to switch platforms. So talk us through how you go about helping people get people off of YouTube once they've found an asset that you put there to your site.
Yeah, it's true, because the growth on YouTube is really kind of alluring, right? And that's kind of where this thought that, going where the audience is came from is, kind of they're there. And, in some cases, we get distracted by the marketing value, that you get from being on those different platforms. But this gets back to, I think that there's a formula for, that kind of having a great user experience, which is something that YouTube has. They really do a tremendous job of keeping you watching. One of the simplest but most sophisticated, kind of techniques that they use is actually really unifying kind of the content and advertising experience. And so YouTube will actually watch how much you've been, kind of consuming video by minutes consumed. And they kind of carefully track that ratio to the number of ads that you're seeing. So essentially the time you're spent seeing advertising. And you'll notice that over time, as you're clicking around, say on YouTube, in some cases they just won't show you ads, right? Because you stopped consuming content, you're clicking around to find something you want to watch. They're very sophisticated at leveraging that data to then make better programming decisions for you in the future, right, as an individual. And so that kind of same methodology can be applied on your owned and operated site. And so if you actually understand, really what is in demand, what is driving, high completion rates, what's driving, kind of a net positive user experience, right? So essentially getting viewers to stick around and watch more and continue watching, then you can start to build a methodology around that, right? So then you can start to think through, in the digital industry, we don't use the term windows a lot, right? Like you would in traditional television, right? You had your kind of initial airing, and then you had windows for, essentially, at home, your reruns, and kind of that kind of licensing model. Even with, shorter form content, if you have an exclusive, or you have, breaking news about the Grammys, the Oscars, the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup, anything that's kind of, unique to your site, your audience, then you can use that to drive demand and leverage those channels as marketing. And kind of, it might be a teaser where you're giving away, a short piece of content, but then the piece that everyone's really going to want to see, that goal that, essentially made it go into overtime, or, that kind of award and, their reaction following it and what the commentary was, you can actually save that for your own site and then just build a methodology and kind of, we see this time and time again, and it's different depending on the publisher or broadcaster. But there's really effective ways that you can do this. And Facebook is also a really kind of become a great platform for that, where you're giving away, say, a picture and a caption, but not the full video.
Are you able to track whether or not people are engaging with the advertising and in a situation where you're matching brand safety and contextual targeting? Are you able to actually watch the sort of clicking between video and advertising, or are you not part of that entire data
We
stream?
do, yeah. So we are not advertising technology, in that, we're not an ad server. But when we're looking at the user experience, so there's a couple important topics there. One is context, which is huge, and it's something we should definitely chat more about because it's, kind of on the rise now in display. But by the end of, 2019, cookies are very much going away as a result of GDPR and the upcoming California Consumer Protection Act, CCPA. So that's going to kind of be changing rapidly here in the U.S. as well. So that's kind of there's some kind of important elements around context that have been some great kind of examples of who's doing that really well. But when you're looking at just a video stream, you can actually see what the drop-off rate is what we call it. And yeah, we track that. We actually dig in, and some of the reporting that we generate for our clients can actually show exactly where that drop-off occurs, so between the first and the second video. And that has a great effect in terms of loyalty. So the clients that we're seeing that are successfully building loyalty, one is like the Weather Network. They've been able to get 50% of their audience to be loyal. So they're coming back to that site, more than 8 times in a month. Kind of the same behavior you'd hope you're getting from someone who's turning on your channel and watching weather content on a TV. They've been able to achieve that by kind of carefully managing that user experience. And we've seen, kind of other really large broadcasters where the ad drop-off rate is as high as, say, like 36% in between the first and the second video. And what that helps you understand is like, okay, well, should we play with the frequency? Are we having connectivity issues between our ad server and maybe our programmatic stack? If it's all sold direct, then, maybe there's, maybe some elements that we're having, issues just purely with our ad server and the way it's integrated with our video player. And then there's great ways to kind of QA that. But the way we look at it is kind of a more holistic QA around the user experience that drives kind of a net positive that is getting people to stick around and watch longer. Because time and time again, we see that if you pursue a formula that leads to new users, coming back at least more than once a month, and especially if you can get them to become loyal, those end up becoming your most profitable audiences. And that's a formula YouTube has understood really well, right? It started out with, no ads, and then they've slowly kind of turned it into a huge revenue machine. Something that Facebook understands really well. But unfortunately, as a media company, we often don't see as much revenue as we'd like from those platforms. Those companies are really good at extracting value for themselves and not always at sharing it. So if you can use some of those methods and learn from them, use them as marketing channels, not distribution, we find that that can be kind of a really great formula for growth on your own site, which I think a few years ago seemed really daunting, like how are we going to compete with those platforms? But the technology is getting cheaper. There's great solutions available. And we find, there's brilliant folks inside of every one of these companies we work with. And, it's just about providing them the right tools to create that kind of feedback loop.
Sorry, Tracy. I had a great conversation with Henry Embleton from Elation about optimal ad placement, and he'd done a lot of testing of ad loads and positioning of ads, and he found out some pretty interesting things. It sounds to me like you have technology that can tell a client of yours the optimal ad load and the optimal ad placement. Is that true?
We do a lot of that. Yeah. And we combine it all with, kind of great programming. So that is true. Yeah. And kind of, I think what we're focused on is how do you kind of unite that experience so it's a little bit more intuitive and, just actually delights the user, right? Because if they're coming to your site to see something that you alone have and it's in demand from that audience, that is a really unique opportunity, right? So you don't want to screw that up. And if you start to then turn that into a science where you're learning and kind of not trying to squeeze every drop out of them, in terms of, the most ads in that kind of one session, but instead viewing it as more holistic, like, okay, if we have content in demand over the course of a schedule throughout a year and we have a great user experience and we're learning, then it actually becomes a method that you can use kind of that data on the ad experience. And also the programming, right? So really kind of programming. So when viewers come in, we're looking for a certain type of content, seeing how it performs, like is recency too high? Maybe they're coming in for back catalog because it's a food site or, DIY, or, you have great, content that actually is a little bit older, or maybe it really is all about breaking news, but you want to make sure it's topical. And even if, like, say, a sport publisher, we find that viewers, they might come in watching, say, a hockey clip, and let's say they're, it's, the Blackhawks, right? So they might be interested in more hockey, or they might be interested in more Chicago sports. So understanding how to program to that viewer and really updating and kind of nailing it in real time is the method that we're finding to be really successful in driving that type of loyalty we were talking about.
Are you able to gather so much data across all your different customers that you're understanding trends and what works better, so that you can then take that, all those learnings, and then talk to new customers and say, you might want to work with these demographics, or, these terms, or whatever set of tools that you could offer to help them right from the beginning, generate better usage and loyalty, rather than waiting to see how their customers are reacting in real time? I mean, to what extent do you have that ready-made, information
formula? Yeah. So
formula.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I think it really comes down to everyone is unique. Even if you have two companies covering weather events, their audiences are going to be a little bit different. So what we focus on is building, structuring, and creating really valuable first-party data that you can use in real-time programming with your audiences, but you kind of then are getting that kind of feedback loop of which content categories or shows or types of content covering a certain event perform best in a certain region, a certain time of day. When are we driving the most completed views, or getting people to watch longer if it's more episodic? And then that can inform, when you're doing kind of notifications, and, we've seen clients of ours even decide when to send their email kind of newsletters based on this data, if they're like very video focused property. So yeah, I think it really comes down to your first party data. Certainly we don't share kind of the broader audience segments, because we do touch a huge number of individuals. It's about 200 to 300 million, kind of uniques that we're seeing. And so that kind of data set is really valuable. But as an enterprise service, that's all locked off to each client. But what we are able to recognize is, and this actually is accelerated through, partnerships with, a partner like IBM Watson, is that when you see kind of certain trends of, say, a video about an individual is trending, or about a topic, a keyword category, kind of a news story, say like Mueller, or, Brexit, or whatever it is, that then you're going to actually be able to learn from that kind of, and what's working. And we do then leverage that data set, that kind of data network, so to speak, across all of our clients. But then if another, say, news publisher who, let's say they're on the West Coast and there's a breaking story in Europe, right, that has already kind of gone viral throughout that day, and it's evening there now, when people are getting up on the West Coast, you can take advantage of that, right? And so that kind of data we do leverage, and is kind of everyone benefits from, without kind of getting into anything that ties back to individuals or each publisher or broadcaster's audience.
Are you saying that you're combining, if a publisher, like a news publisher, also is owned by, or it delivers video content, that you can extract data from both of those experiences and provide better recommendations for?
Yeah, and it's going to be unique to their audience and their content archive. But if there's, say, a topical trend that's a very popular clip, right? So the NBA just had kind of their slam dunk contest, right? And so there might be one individual that had a really standout moment that might be trending the next day, and that we're seeing on one of our sports kind of broadcasters sites. That actual data then can be leveraged, and then others who have similar content are seeing great performance as a result, because they also have coverage of that individual. It's trending. A viewer might come in to see something a little different, and depending how their business rules are structured, because they have control over all of this, but that can surface and essentially a little bit more readily. And so they get to take advantage of some of the techniques used by the walled gardens, but it's all on their owned and operated sites where they're generating much higher margin and revenue per view. So yeah, that's kind of an advantage that we're seeing, especially the larger that we get. It's kind of helping accelerate our clients' respective businesses.
So we're running out of time here, although this is such an interesting topic. I have one last question for you, Phil, and that is: have you got what's the coolest thing or a really cool thing that you've been able to do with the AI and machine learning approach that you couldn't possibly have done before? Can you give us a quick example of a really cool thing that you could do?
Yeah, I think what's really unique is when you have that kind of structured data, and then in real time you're using that kind of the AI, right, to program and kind of keep viewers watching, right, with relevant content, and it follows business rules. We're seeing that many of our clients are using contextual data to create business rules that align with their advertising. So mentioned kind of briefly that context is something that we are seeing becoming more and more important in 2019. And so if you have your library kind of indexed by the contextual data points on each video, then you actually can then observe over the course of, say, a month, where your audience is really watching the most content. And that'll change, right, as different kind of events occur. But you can then start to say, okay, if I have a brand who really wants to, say, do a huge campaign against basketball, and I know that it's, a certain percent of my video, then I can actually sell that and actually manage the programming. And I can actually then, override some of the rules. So it might be that someone's coming in to watch US News, but I want to recommend and show them then basketball because I have this huge sponsorship, that you can actually then align the targeting of that context and align it with the ad inventory. And we're finding that this is driving much higher value inventory. And you can then measure and see how it performs from a programming point of view, right? So if you find that, okay, this category and basketball really do quite poorly together, so let's never kind of, lock off a viewer into that kind of rule, but maybe everywhere else it really works, right? And kind of we're seeing the kind of same number of video completes per viewing experience or session as we would normally, then we can really take advantage of that. So I think that this is something that, kind of Google has done to a huge degree on YouTube, right? It's like a big part of what they recommend is based on who's willing to pay the highest dollar. And so we're starting to see that now, leveraging some of these tools, publishers and broadcasters are using this. And we think it's really exciting because when you have a great user experience, but you're able to drive more revenue from each ad that you place, you then also are able to kind of play around a little bit more with less ad serving that improves the user experience and builds loyalty.
I have actually another question, not to end too soon, but it kind of goes in line with what I asked originally, which is who's doing it best, or which platform did you like? But not necessarily going back there. I love the fact that the note that was provided here was that the Ellen Show doesn't necessarily use your data to create TV programs, but it uses it to determine the optimal way to clip, share, and acquire audiences. Thanks to Melissa. Thanks for putting that together. That to me was very interesting because more than just worrying about brand safety and ad targeting and things like that, this is a set of tools that potentially can be used to deliver content back to the viewers, to provide them with enhanced content, things that support their loyalty to the show, their fan base. And I find that these other platforms that I mentioned in the beginning, like Netflix, etc., they don't do that very well. So the shows like Ellen that are able to take advantage of your set of tools to do this, my guess is that they're going to be a lot more successful. And I'm definitely curious if you know of any other specific examples like that, or and could you also talk a little bit about how you present your data, your insights, to the producers so that they don't have to think too much and then be able to act on those insights? Because I know when I look at all of these platforms, they're all very complex. And so I'm looking for that platform that can communicate to me as a content producer in a sort of simple way, right? So that you can be proactive. Like apparently the producers on the Ellen Show.
Like the larger the broadcaster is, then the more that they have to, kind of manage, right? They might have hundreds of videos they produce a week. And we often find that those that, may appear at first glance like they'll do the best, say on a homepage or as something that you are acquiring audiences to, they often have what we look at as very high bounce rates, which means that viewers don't complete that video. And just from the perspective of Iris TV, since we're, kind of solely focused on, creating those feedback loops to keep viewers watching, that is a kind of a red flag, right? So Daily Express, which is a news publication in the UK, is really brilliant at this. And they, over the course of the past, couple years, have become just kind of a major force there, in terms of growing their audience and leveraging data on really like, who's watching what and what's performing well, to then drive kind of viewers to the content that's actually performing the best. And, there's some heuristics that'll come into play, like, videos of certain lengths, end up performing, kind of the best for that audience, and certain types of content at different types of day or, after certain events. But yeah, it really is all kind of based on experimentation and looking at that kind of consumption data, where then you can start to, understand what really keeps viewers watching, and making sure that, as you said, is what is being shown to audiences when they first get to a site, or, what you're actually attracting them to, coming from, say, a social network.
Very good. So this is a fascinating topic, Tracy. I think this is something that we better have a panel on this at the TV of Tomorrow show in June, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Don't you think?
We always do something with these set of topics, just in different configuration, different angle.
Indeed.
Yes.
But Field, thank you so much for joining us.
And Field is always there as well.
Yeah, I'm always there.
He is. So Field, thank you for joining us on Tea Time. It's been great chatting with you, and hopefully we can have you back and talk about some of the cool things that you're doing.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you, Field. All right. Well, again, please check out iris.tv at that URL. There's all kinds of customers we really didn't get to go into, like Fox and News Corp, Telepictures, and all kinds of publications, people.
Yep. Yeah. There's a great white paper on the Weather Channel. So really tons of interesting stuff from Iris TV.
Yeah, Weather Network. Thank you so much.
This is Tracy Swedlow. Please check out the tvoftomorrowshow.com for more information about the upcoming conference, June 12th and 13th in San Francisco. And we will all be there doing a live Tea Time podcast, right?
You bet. We'll be there doing a live Tea Time podcast, and I can't wait to see you all. Come and check it out and say hi when you get there.